How delicate is the balance of the human brain and its electrical inputs? Down to its core, our meat suits are really just electricity, chemicals, and anxiety if you think about it, and if my ramblings are anything to go off of, the 3.5-pound chemoelectric anxiety machine completely backs up that statement. But given its electrical nature and how we are able to utilize it to communicate, think, and act, if something were to, say, completely override that and remap the brain, what would happen to human consciousness, our communication skills, or really even our own free will? Well, surprisingly, this movie actually tackles this deeper topic and doesn't take 3,458 years to set it up. I was pleasantly surprised. A lot of you have been asking for this movie, but for the life of me, I can really only remember like Big Tiny 1102 and My Own Death requesting it off the top of my head. But as a mysterious phone call is sent out to everyone everywhere all at once, people would immediately begin convulsing on the spot before turning absolutely rabid on one another. As one man allegedly survives the process, he goes looking for his son. But the question is, did any of them really make it out? Well, that's the philosophical one, because the real question is, how is the brain rewired to actually play music out of people's throats? Well, let's discuss all that in today's topic, covering Cell from 2016. But first, this episode is sponsored by War Thunder. Are you ready to take the battle with you everywhere as well as at home? Of course you are. Take command of 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships of 10 major nations, ranging from biplanes to armored cars of the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. War Thunder can be played for free on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and now the mobile version is available on both Android and Apple, featuring intuitive controls, impressive graphics, and the ever-familiar massive multiplayer warfare and dynamic ground and sea battles with air support. Not enough for you? Well, you might think, hey, it's just a simple box with hit points. Absolutely wrong. Intricately modeled down to its individual components like engines, fuel tanks, weapons, and crew, War Thunder boasts one of the most sophisticated vehicle damage models in gaming, which is great for you as well as your enemy. Also offering a game mode for every player, they ramp up realism over time. What do I mean? Well, arcade suits those craving fast-paced matches and enhanced vehicle performance with more simplified physics. Simulator mode ditches all guardrails for the ultimate challenge, while realistic mode is more of a middle ground that balances intensity and authenticity. Whatever you want to play, they have it for you. All of this heavily optimized to deliver lag-free experiences and impressive visuals with high frame rates, even on your grandma's computer. My favorite part about War Thunder would have to be its absolute goated level of customization, where you can take your plane and build it the way that you want, or I guess a tank, or really anything else that you want to build for the battle that's ahead. So again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video, and don't forget to play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile devices now using my links in the pinned comment and video description. And with that, new and returning players on PC and consoles that haven't played in the last 6 months, or they're new, will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 silver lines, and 7 days of premium content. It's available for a limited time only, so be quick. Immerse yourself in intense combat and join the worldwide community of 70 million players in epic PvP battles today. So, alright, I actually wrote this script before having seen the numbers on the other video on Sinners to see if you guys prefer the summary and then science, the older style of videos. But I'm already writing it like this, and I've had my coffee, so we're just gonna go ahead and do it live. If you wanna jump into the science, go to the timestamp up on screen, or hit the chapters bar. We kick off our story with 19,385 production companies. As a plane is landing, we have an annoying giant bar in the way covering up most of the screen as Cell appears. Seriously, as that one guy put it from like my breakdowns of my videos, that I do use activated my almonds a lot. I mean, I guess I'll just say then it rustled my jimmies, no idea why. As Perfect Cell starts playing, oh wait, wrong movie. We are at an airport as everyone is then walking shoeless getting checked. Everyone is on their phone as that is the general theme nowadays. Because what else are you gonna do in an airport unless you're me, which is internally panicking because you hate flying? Seriously. It's a horrifying experience. But you'd never know apart from the sweat and spastic rapid twitching. And lately, everything going on is not helping. As assumingly our main character calls home, telling a woman about how his stuff is being picked up and sold, this appears to be his ex-wife, who's obviously still in love with him, of course. He starts FaceTiming his son on a BlackBerry as he asks if he's coming home. He forgot to charge it, as he does the impossible and searches for an outlet at the airport. Like Sisyphus pushing a rock up the mountain just to have it roll back down, it's a fruitless endeavor. You think that there would be way more outlets, but no, it's by design, to be honest with you. Using a payphone, which is pretty retro, he calls his current wife, Who is this? Well, I think it's his wife, but evidently he's been gone. He just noped out for like over a year. So she's like, it's not that simple for him coming back. Hitting her with the, well, I want to see my son. You didn't want to see him for a year, so why have things changed now? He then runs out of time as a man has his almonds activated to the 10th degree across the way, as then he starts screaming. Others have their jimmies rustled, didn't realize I said this twice, as they all scream as everyone who is listening to their cell phone starts convulsing and then becomes massively violent. As everyone starts running around, one guy then pants down around his ankles, starts going goblin mode on one woman as old Johnny here then hits him in the head with a snow globe. So as you can see, violence. The girl goes to call 911 as one guy is consuming his canine, which I can deal with a movie taking out humans, but when it comes to quadrupeds, I imagine I'm pretty much like everybody else in this respect. I hate to see it. They're the only innocent thing on this planet. Alright, well now that I hate this movie, the girl who tried to call 111 then smashes her face into the wall before running off as the cook is just straight up stabbing people. Going to attack Cusack over here. No, my drawings! Of course, Johnny is masterful at the art of blocking everything, so he's good to go, as the cops come in and then take out the guy who's attacking him. He tells the cops not to use their cell phone as he takes off running after the cops because that seems like the best move, to be honest. Shooting exclusively at Johnny here, he then hides before he takes off and attempts to hide again, but he's not that small as he used to be. Actually, in hindsight, I think this is an important part of the movie. Those are aimed shots. Those are not just at random. Like, they didn't just all go towards him. There's actually some clues into this movie that sort of hint that things aren't exactly the way that you think, which is very interesting. Or I'm reading way too much into it, which is just as likely, and you know that's pretty evident if you've ever watched this channel. And speaking of this channel, you might want to check to see if you're still subscribed. I brought this up in the last few videos, and I keep getting comments about being unsubbed, which means YouTube did a cleanse on subs not too long ago. So if you enjoy the content, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that you never get alerted to videos on this channel ever again in your life. I have no idea why they add an extra step, because when you subscribe, that probably means you're interested, but hey, the powers that be want it this way. Anyhow, putting on a hat, he looks alarmingly like Nicolas Cage, which now I can't unsee that, as planes begin crashing into each other in the sky. See, this is why I don't fly, in case some mystery signal pops up and my brains are scrambled. I'd rather just take the first gen Tacoma across the entire continent and do it the old-fashioned way. Get turned into a mindless zombie in the wide open plains of Montana, because I decided to channel my younger days and watch a 360 no-scope gamer MLG montage set to Breaking Benjamin. Only the strongest will survive, obviously, at a gas station at 4 a.m. Seems pretty specific? It's because I've done that many times. It's the natural way. Okay, so that has nothing to do with anything, and now that that tangent is complete and 4 people are still watching, let's move on. Mr. Cage here keeps running as the airport then starts getting absolutely wrecked by falling planes, as he has 2 people still chasing him. Also, have you ever been chased before? It's exhausting. You can never run fast enough. Everyone down in the train area are convulsing and vibing in the worst way possible as one of the guys then comes out with a sledgehammer to take out Mr. Cage, but is stopped before turning his head into jelly. However, what I want you to take note of is that the darkness does cause them to lay down. We'll discuss that later. Oh, you know what? We're gonna discuss that now. It's the circadian rhythm. It appears as though when blue light is not actively in your eyes, you will shut down. So as they enter the train, what is Jules doing here? Being the conductor, he tells them they can't take the train out of there due to the power outage, as he says, well, maybe they can just walk out of there. Mr. Cage says he doesn't care. He's gonna walk out of there regardless. Jules then tells them, as in like them being everybody on the train, that if the groundwater pumps start failing, then this whole place is gonna fill with water and they will all drown. So the group is split as Cage, Jules, and random handsome fodder guy, or RHFG, leave out for a walk. Hopefully nothing happens to the people on the train or the one non-famous guy in the group. Also, RHFG is apparently called DJ Liquid. Right. So Liquid Snake and the rest of them then head out. Approaching the exit, people are just standing there and they wonder if they are normal. Yes. As you know, a national pastime of standing in front of the entrance to a tunnel where trains come out of is completely normal. Stop asking stupid questions. So as they wax poetically about it being a friendly situation, they turn as Liquid Snake takes an axe to the chest. Snake! And record time on that joke. Anyways, dude died inside of like 10 sentences. Climbing a ladder, they then emerge into a town which has gone full Silent Hill, as it appears sirens are ringing out, alerting everyone that yes, everything has indeed gone to crap. Closing the grate, they then roll a dumpster over it as they take off down the street. Loudly heading into a building, Jules then tells him to hold it, as evidently he knows a woman who is down at the front. What are the odds? Well, I guess really the odds are pretty good. It is his apartment. Anyways, heading to the second floor, a quadruped starts barking, as then they head into Cage's apartment. He doesn't know if he should use the phone or not, if that's really gonna make him become one of those things, as it appears he has a Dr. Mambo who is hungry. Feed the feline, or fatten the beast, as it's called, whichever. Holding the phone away from his head, Cage then sees a text completely jumbled up, which, depending on who you ask, could be rather important. Of course, it's just like you and me in here, so currently, yeah, it's important. Jules then tells him to put his battery in the freezer because it'll make it last longer. So I'm about to do that like nerd emoji with like the finger up and the glasses. This actually slows down the chemical reaction, but it can damage the internal components and cause condensation to form, which damages the battery, shortening its lifespan. It's a common misconception about putting them in the freezer, just as a heads up. I could be totally tripping, I think, but back when Texas experienced that deep freeze a few years ago, I think a lot of people had batteries damaged on their electric cars, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyhow, so they drink that night and then talk about Liquid Snake and how he got. Hearing pounding on the door, they then hear someone outside. Opening a door, the woman from upstairs heard them as she tells them to close the blinds as they might be seen. The woman says she had to take out her own mom, and yes, we get confirmation. The other woman, apparently, there was another woman there that was his girlfriend. Like, what? Some woman is this guy's girlfriend. Lighting a candle in the wind for her, she then goes to change as a storm moves in. Petting Dr. Mambo, the morally correct decision, they then talk about both their families. He assumes, wait a minute. Okay, well, hold on. So that woman that he was talking to earlier was his wife. So this dude disappeared for a year, and he's also got a girlfriend. Brother, you just suck, man. Also, pay no attention to that voice crack. So potential girlfriend number 2, which I'm going to stop myself there. When I first saw this person, in my defense, the movie was dark. As all get out, she is in fact not potential girlfriend. She is another mouth to feed. Moving on. So she comes out thanking him for the clothes as she attempts to go to sleep. Jules then smokes in Cage's apartment without asking, as then they discuss what could have even caused this. They got lucky and avoided whatever it was. Yeah, maybe not so much. Hearing a phone call in the freezer, Jules just ignores that, as outside, everyone's just stumbling around, seemingly a bit emotionally dysregulated and hoarding up. Another mouth to feed then says they are all acting like a flock of birds. I'd say rats and a chia pet, but that's just my opinion. Realizing they need to get out of there because maybe a city center wasn't the best idea. Again, plains of Montana. They begin hoofing it out of there, running into a flock of humans as 2 people on a bike get totally got because they were idiots not looking forward ahead of the bike. How did you guys miss this giant group exactly? They were like pretty far down the street. Anyways, using that as a distraction, they then run past like true heroes and then make it into a graveyard, which means they are almost out of the city, which is not established fact on anything. They then find a house of someone who is super 2A, hell yeah brother, stay strapped or get clapped. This is the good old USA after all. And for some reason, that always makes people mad. Like, I love this place. It's not perfect, but it has its flaws, right? But what place doesn't? So breaking in, maybe knocking would have been a better idea, right? They have basically shown that they shoot first and ask questions later. Heading to the second floor, another mouth to feed, then finds the owners have taken themselves out in a subsequent fight. Arming themselves, they then go and find the rest of the force multipliers, as in they lock and load Brides of Christ, as another mouth looks out the window and a random person is just on the swing set, looking totally normal and well adjusted and not strange at all. I would totally talk to that person. Sure, why not? Being loaded up though, this is 30 pounds of divine intervention. If God is love, then you can call me Cupid. Also, this was the exact point I had actually seen the girl in the light. This is a really dark movie. So another mouth to feed, being a youngling with 2 adults here who should probably, I don't know, maybe not let her call out to this dude, calls out to the guy on the swing set as he turns around, immediately going to attack with an axe. As we can see, tool usage has not gone out the window, which is fairly interesting. However, due to that, everyone who was in the area now comes out from behind trees as they start chasing after the trio, as some of the infected run into trees and break their legs. Ouchies. Also, one guy's just straight up in his whitey tighties. Embarrassing. Jules then turns and squares up on the horde in typical Samuel L. Jackson methods, lighting them up as many are dropped. Continuing their jaunt, more are coming down the hillside as then they approach a river with the sun going down. The horde loses sight of them as they hide under a boat, but none think to check under the boat because of plot armor. So they can just use tools, but they can't get through a wooden boat? So as everyone there then looks at the sun, they let out a mechanical sound from their throats, which, while a bit strange, not impossible. So as the meeting of the minds concludes, they all then turn and walk off back up the hill. Again, time to just stand in that boat for a little while and stay quiet, or just immediately leave, whichever I guess. So the horde retreats to a stasis group to seemingly stay warm, I think, as the Congo line continues forming up the hillside, heading towards the tower. Are you serious? They're actually holding each other going up the hill. This movie is hilarious and is unironically a comedy. So Jules then says it looks like when the sun goes down, they all go back in. Definitely looks like to a degree that the human brain is still somewhat functional, as biological drives such as their circadian rhythm is still very much so working. They then talk about how it's possible that they all knew exactly where they were, even if they didn't really see them. So Mouth to Feed says they are a hive mind, but Jules doesn't believe it. I mean, Jules, you saw that crap, man. Definitely a hive mind situation. But I believe them to be operating as a biological receivers of sorts, which, we will once again talk about the electromagnetic coupling a little bit, but this one is going to be a little bit more involving the temporal lobe being rewired. So continuing their hike, Jules is just a ride or die at this point, as they are evidently going to go get Cage's son, and these two are just along for the ride. And then talk about the great collapse of '08 and how he lost his mind, and the great divorce of '09. If only I could have invested in real estate around this time and not been 16 years old instead. Talk about laziness on my part. Anyhow, '09, yep, those things happen, man, but there's always the next chapter of life. So as they approach school, it appears many of the younglings who had cell phones had been subdued. The ones who didn't succumb to this issue ran off into the woods. So they decide to stay there for the time being, as evidently the music playing from people's throats means everyone's infected in the field and they're just kind of staying there in stasis. Yeah, so this could either be real or it could be something much more horrible. So the music plays from their mouths as they stay in a perpetual state of stasis for the night. The headmaster says that they appear to be a eusocial species now. No competitiveness, no selfishness. Hopefully I didn't say that weird. They could be the next stage of human evolution. The headmaster then says they are rebooting, as they discuss the brain being an organic hard drive, which, yeah, the hardware is the same, but the software has changed over time. However, what this appears to be is a biological receiver of sorts, which to understand this, I have to break in. I literally cannot help myself. There's a video online that if you are an engineer of sorts, you won't really think it's all that interesting, but I'm a biology guy, so I find it incredibly fascinating because I had no idea it worked like this. Essentially, there are two guys standing next to a radio tower. One of the guys then takes out his pliers and arcs a current to them from the tower. Seeing this is a radio tower, it's carrying information that is currently within that electrical signal. So as the electricity arcs, you can literally hear the radio playing through the electrical arc. I have no idea why this is so amazing to me, but it's also horrifying at the same time. Electrical energy being turned into sound waves. I mean, it's all just energy, right? But for it to arc and be heard, is that not wild? But that'll relate to the science portion of this video, but I just want you to know it is entirely possible. Maybe Greg can go find the clip or put it up with the sound, but you guys will know what I'm talking about. You know what? I'm gonna find it and then send it to my editor so that he can show you.
I failed you. You trusted me. And I failed you.
But the headmaster then suggests in the walk that what is happening now is temporary and eventually they will not need this much sleep. Of course, there's no way he knows for sure that is really gonna go down, as that's all theory and politics right now, but I mean, it could be the case later. The headmaster then wants to napalm the sleeping students with gasoline, showing that they are stuck in stasis and don't react to anything. He stabs one of them in the leg, and again, they don't react. So getting into the truck, Jules and Cage just kind of take off and spray everyone with gasoline as they drive through. Drinking and driving, they then move through as everyone else kind of locks and loads just in case, and talking to another youngling, they kind of just get stuck spraying the stasis people as they finish their grisly task and then move to the other side. The headmaster then goes to ignite the field, and actually with that much gasoline, you were talking about like an actual explosion rather than just a slow burn. The music now stops as many start getting out of the field because they're on fire and they're not really happy about it. So it seems like they are more so responding to light, possibly rather than the burning sensation. Although you should always respond to any burning sensation with haste. Like idiots, they didn't move the truck far enough away though, and because they were drinking, so as the headmaster is taken out by the explosion, not the character we just met 8 minutes ago, no! I remember how he used to stab students in the legs, and who could forget his archery skills? Looking out, Cage then says, it seems like rage. Well, you did light them on fire. I'm sure I'd be not thrilled about this arrangement either. So the next morning, there are 4 of them, as in they keep walking through towards Cage's son, as Jules then talks about the Bible and the end times. After that nice bedtime story, everyone just lays down to go to sleep, as Cage is the first to wake up in what appears to be an empty dark room, I suppose. Heading to the door, are you really gonna dream sequence us? Approaching the well-lit men's bathroom, he sees a guy back there just hanging out with the woman. Was that his woman? I'm not really sure, to be honest, but I mean, it could have been, but I saw her for only like 3 seconds at the beginning of this movie, and as he wakes up, another mouth to feed asks if he had a nightmare. After that burning of last night, yes, I'd imagine you would all be having nightmares. Everyone else had the same dream though, which is a bit alarming. It was the drawing Cage had made from his graphic novel. So they all had the same dream despite not being infected. Allegedly. Walking outside, a pile of burned phones are just sitting there as they all get calls from an unknown number. Continuing their trek, it is now snowing in the town. Knocking on the door, they are allowed into the bar as they have all come to the Winchester to have a nice pint and wait for all this to blow over. Barwoman then asks how they got there and continues to make a few passes at Jules, as then he heads to the jukebox and begins playing music, which seems like a pretty bad idea, right? I mean, the phones are able to have the signal play through their speaker on the phone, so what's stopping a jukebox from doing the same thing and scrambling all of their brains? Everyone then talks about their life, and I think at this point Jules has been drunk almost every single day. Then again, they say the end of the world is just a giant party, right? Cage then talks about his novel and how he drew the devil, as Jules says, good always conquers evil. In the end, yes, but day to day, I'd say evil persists quite a bit. Another mouth is drinking a beer, which I don't think she's old enough for that, as Cage continues his drawings, as she says Cage is going to find his son. He then talks about how he ran out on his family like a complete idiot. Another mouth then says he probably ran out because he wanted a girlfriend or his wife or whoever that is to be proud of him. Yeah, that's a pretty naive view on things. As an older male myself, no, I just think he was a chode for running out on his family. Oh no, I just wanted you guys to be proud of me, haha. That's why I ran off on my wife and child for a year and got a girlfriend. Aren't you proud of me? No, nobody's proud of you. You actually just kind of suck. So Barwoman now wakes up and then heads to the door to lock it up, as the keys were already in it, and then she has a nice listen to the door. As everyone does this, her eyes then widen, as Cage gets up to go check on her, and at this point, you should know, anyone standing there not responding, they're infected. So they get attacked one by one as the other guys also start getting into the fight, with many being dropped in the process. Apparently, they can now scream in your ear and infect you, which it does make sense, believe it or not, and I hate that it makes sense. But the original squad has another mouth get hit in the head in the process, and taking her outside, many blood vessels in her eye have been blown as she's not looking so great. Head wounds like that, not very ideal. She whispers a few things before it appears that she flatlines out. Jules hugs the youngling over here, as then they go to bury her. Yeah, brain bleeds are no joke. Also, the guy from the dream is apparently watching all of them. Continuing their walk, it's still continuing to snow, it rains, but eventually they make it to a campsite where they find what appears to be a family. Just kidding, random survivors who are working to take out the phone freaks, as they call them, or phoners, or great big phony. Anyway, it's a ridiculous name, right? It's not just the phoners. Okay, this is like, oh, we gotta watch out for the Zeeks and the runners. Just call them zombies, bro. So everybody apparently they're all having the same dreams. See, this would be mildly concerning if you are all having the same dream, right? You are seeing the same guy, and this indicates you are not unscathed. They all say that they need to take out the main guy, and apparently one of these dudes is just super agitated. Cannot possibly be a problem later, right? So they ask the plan of taking him out. They have one guy who's infected. The closer the horde gets to him, the crazier he gets. So they ask if he could be rehabbed, as one of his voices then starts repeating, when are you coming home? Which is the same thing that Cage's son said, and it's also the same voice. So this causes the crash out of the century as he just pops around into him. Well, great going, genius. Now the canary in the coal mine that you just had is gone. Good work. So they now decide to head out as a group, because this seems like a really cool arrangement that everyone is super happy to be a part of, as this guy then stops the Sunday Shakes van because he wants to kick them out. But instead, he goes up the hill and tells them to follow. Yeah, no thanks. He's pacing in the river, and he knows him and Cage are both seeing his drawings, and tells him his offspring is already toast. Around Mr. Professor Psycho's neck is an improvised concussive force detonator, as he's now checking out of this because he just doesn't want to be here anymore. Okay then. Well, thanks for the ice crew mobile then, brother. So after that extravagant fun time, they finally make it to Cage's home. Also, why didn't they just steal a car earlier? Finding evidence of habitation, but also a break-in, he calls out to them, but hears nothing. Finding literally the largest collection of letter magnets on the fridge. I think you need like 4 packs for this, and I mean, really, nobody ever had enough of these things. Basically, the mom has been infected, and the son is going to cashwhack. whatever that is. He has enough letters to even use his middle name. This family is basically a bunch of nerds. Realizing that he's not there, hey, that mom is also still infected. He goes and smells some clothes as he crashes out now too, hearing something. What are these industrial fans in the background? Heading up to the attic, yes, reminiscent of The Walking Dead where you find that one youngling in the attic, and I'm gonna take a strong stance here. Keith was not as much of a bro as everyone made him out to be, just saying. Attaching the doorknob to the mystery door, he's immediately attacked by the man of his dreams in the worst way possible. That's what they want you to think. It's actually his wife as Jules and Cage stomp her out. Realizing what he has done, that's a bit of a spirit breaker, ain't it? So heading downstairs, he sits at the table and then messes with his god-tier flip phone. As he says, Mr. Dr. Psycho told him to call when they reach the end of the line or the last stop. Searching the van, they actually find a ton of concussive force detonators in it, as Cage says he needs to go and get his son as he compares himself to Orpheus. Well now, I wouldn't attribute that level of badassery to you quite yet. He then shakes hands with Jules as he takes off in the explosive ice cream machine to head to Kashwak as people are on the side of the road, either trying to get him to stop or attack, I'm not really sure. Of course, they did say they want to be taken with them though, so I'm guessing they're not infected. Driving into the night, he sees a ton of infected, but it's so dark it's almost impossible to make out. They surround the tower as he begins driving through them, I guess, with them getting actually out of the way because who wants to be run over by an ice cream truck? Making his way to the inner circle, he then spots the man of his dreams, attempting to just run him over. My God, that actually worked. Are you serious? I cannot believe that. Like, that's a bit anticlimactic. Just ran him over. So getting out, the person is wearing a collar as then he starts saying something as Cage then pops a few rounds into him. That was easier than thought. So, I mean, it cannot be this simple, right? Then calling out to his son, voices begin responding and warbing, as it's stated, can be heard. He then starts going in on them with a shovel, making his way through looking for his son. Breaking on through to the other side, you see the signal destroys the brain, but the van divides the crowd. Johnny then approaches him as they hug it out, as the crowd then starts singing, now with the man from his dreams singing, but it appears Johnny was infected in the process. Cage then detonates the tower as everyone is engulfed in flames, except Psych. They somehow made it out as they begin walking their way out of there. He was literally consumed by the fireball and he just survived. Okay then. Well, they follow the markings on the tree that Cage had requested the school youngling put up on the tree so that they could find their way home. And this whole thing doesn't seem right though, as I can only assume they're in some sort of afterlife because there was no shot you were surviving that fireball except Mega Psych. As we approach the crowd once more, it actually shows he was infected in the process. He's just stuck in his own brain. And thus concludes Cell. Okay. So before getting into the science on this one, we need to kind of highlight a pretty glaring issue. The movie itself, that was the issue. Anyways, you also may have noticed the other issue, but did any of this actually even happen? Clearly Cage was infected and is part of the crowd, wandering around, but in his mind, he thinks that he made it out and he's living another life entirely separate from this existence, just in his head. And remember, this is a hive mind scenario, so he really is connected to his son, just not in the physical realm, but in the mental one. Because of this, the hive mind is clearly still going to be discussed, but I want to point out a few examples that kind of show it is entirely possible nothing even happened in the first place. So first, Cage was just on the phone when the signal dropped. This could have easily exposed him to the infection. Second, the cops were taking pot shots at specifically him. That doesn't just happen. Like, were they just wildly thrashing? I don't know. So it's not accidental. They just didn't land. Third, them all having the same dream despite not being infected. Fourth, approaching the tower as if it was drawn there looking, or excuse me, as if he was drawn there looking for his son. To me, it seems like everyone is given their own like side mission to head towards the tower. Some would do it for family, some would do it maybe because they thought it was safe. It just seems like those who were infected made up their own little adventure in their head to congregate at the tower. And this may also indicate that the headmaster was actually infected too, and instead of finding these sleeping students, he may have actually forced them into that area for one reason or another, and due to his authority, or like based on the authority idea, they just kind of stayed there as then they were all burned. The reasoning? I doubt that many people were just bunched up at night like that and not absolutely ransacking the school during the day. So basically the headmaster just stabbed somebody in the leg and lit them on fire, showing these same aggression levels that others were showing. It really is no different. I think the entire thing was made up in Cage's head as he made his way to the tower, much like many others did before him. everyone with them may or may not have even been real in the first place. There's really no way to tell. But that won't stop the science, baby. So let's discuss how the brain was physically impacted, because it's really not an issue of just altering chemical signatures, but actually completely changing the structure of the brain. So, as we can see with basically this entire movie, it is completely cracked out, as one might imagine, but even with that said, there actually is a fair amount of accuracy in everything that had worked out, just so it could explain what we were actually seeing and what may be happening neurologically to those involved in this transformation. And let me tell you, Prometheus, it is quite extensive, involving several different areas of the brain, all working in conjunction with one another in a way that works now, which gives us consciousness, which is a fairly complex task, realistically speaking. So let's start with first the symptoms that we see, and then move on to how things continue to change as the process progresses. Although again, this entire thing could have just been inside of his head. Then we'll move on to the discussion about what is happening. So upon answering the phone, as we can all guess, this is the moment that it happens. As soon as the person hears a signal with it close enough to the ears to pick up the auditory signal, then they will immediately begin to change for the worst. Convulsing at first and then foaming at the mouth, they will then progress to a level of violence not seen in their prior lives. I don't believe that this is because the designer of the signal intended it to initially be this way, but it was likely a bit of an unknown, actually. The brain is stupidly complex, and even if you have 95% of it working absolutely flawlessly, if one area of the brain is not playing well with the others, this can have profound consequences on that person, whether it be intelligence, social ability, quality of life, and many other aspects. Of course, there is a brain scan out there of a youngling who grew up with most of his brain basically being replaced by an internal water pocket. Essentially had a blister in his brain that continued to grow, and as it formed, only a small sliver of the cerebrum on the outside was left to operate, and for some reason, he didn't really have any issues. Again, the brain is stupidly complex, and even now, we are not 100% sure how this thing works. But regardless of that, I'm gonna do what Reddit tells me not to do, which is go outside of my scope of practice, which is like, bro, can you imagine if anybody who wanted to talk about anything fun online was like, well, I'm not a PhD on the subject, so I can't really talk about it. Nerd! Anyways, I'm gonna talk to you today because it's just fun, and I don't want to preface everything with it might be this way. So as they become aggressive and lash out at the non-infected, this could be for the reason to prevent anyone from actually fixing the issue and turning these people back into normal tax-paying phoners that they were in their original life, because who would want that? So it may be that the initial aggression could be by design, or maybe it was possibly just set too high of a threshold. But what we do know is that even in 2016, day one patches were a thing with new releases. That night, as everyone went to sleep, they were forcibly shut down, so to speak. Later, it is stated that they were downloading a software update. They play music out of their mouths during this download, which in turn has observable effects later as they get better at using tools and reacting more quickly to non-infected. This could be doing a multitude of things to the brain, but we'll kind of get to the actual movement of this signal through specific tissues here in a moment. But for now, just know this software update is altering the brain behavior, bringing them more in line intelligence-wise to where they used to be in their regular life. It's just their consciousness is gone. During this software update, they appear to be completely removed from their observational skills, and even if they get a knife in the leg, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. And someone can even run over someone else next to them and douse them with gasoline and then set them on fire, which they won't react. Of course, some of them did actually react, because I guess maybe like a large enough pain jolt would get them to start running around. But as these software updates continue, it appears they will begin behaving as one unit. Like a flock of birds in movement, or whatever one individual sees, they all see. So they become essentially eusocial, which eusocials, think of like an ant colony. That's how they operate. So this would indicate that the brain is communicating with something that is then disseminating the information to all others who've had their brain structures altered to this large of a degree. Ultimately, we see that with all of this, they may or may not have had this happen when everyone was just beta orbiting the tower in the giant circle. However, even if it was all just in Cage's head, still the entirety of the process could be happening as such due to the fact that he is still out of it and is doing the same thing that the others are doing. What does that even mean? Was that just a giant word salad? No. So let's start from where this auditory infection actually begins in the first place. As you pick up your phone, a tone is played in your ear. Being compressional waves at first, they would then strike the eardrum in a way that then would, stimulate the inner ear, that would then produce very specific electrical firing signals along the auditory nerve as it makes its way to the temporal lobe in order to be deciphered. It is a relatively known phenomena that actually around 15 to 19 hertz in that range. This is known as infrasound, and it can disrupt brain activity. Actually, I've always found it kind of interesting because imperceptible sounds to the human ear but perceptible to the brain have a tendency to make humans angry and destabilize them emotionally. That's why, along with this, a lot of people might start to feel uncomfortable when hearing infrasound. And this is just low enough for you to know that it's there, but not really loud enough to actively hear or decipher what it is. You're feeling it, you're not hearing it. Of course, this could just be for the reason that your brain absolutely loathes missing information, because missing information means that something could be sneaking up on you like a saber-toothed cat, which, you know, not exactly great for what happened to Uga back in the day when he couldn't decipher what he was hearing either, and you don't want to be that guy. So as the infrasound is heard, it would continue to pulsate in the ears, which, given it's moving at the speed of sound, then, the speed of electrical signals in the brain, it could be oscillating at a frequency that may be purposely synchronizing the electrical activity in the temporal lobe. But why is that a bad thing, I can hear you asking? Well, we call those things seizures. Your brain is not supposed to sync up to this degree. These oscillations can disrupt the neural pathways in other areas of the brain as they are overcome by oscillations of electrical waves. And this is where the crux of the issue is. Within the temporal lobe is the foundational state of the brain that is fairly important, actually. The temporal lobe is known to be connected with other areas of the brain in what is known as a default mode network. What is a default mode network, or DMN? Glad you asked. This system in the brain is a fairly large scale and is typically active during periods of rest, but shuts off when the brain needs to actually pay attention. When the brain doesn't need to pay attention, like, I don't know, you're sitting in AP calculus or something, this turns on and you kind of start disregarding your surroundings. And this is going to include areas such as the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, precuneus, and angular gyrus. I know a lot of words, but basically it is the system that is functioning when you are awake but not paying attention. Happening during things like daydreaming, for instance. It's also, I'm just going to go ahead and make this leap. I think it's probably massively active when you're remembering some horrific thing that you could have done that may have been a social faux pas. I still remember one time I was at my friend's house. I was actually staying with them. They were having a party that night. Obviously, I was at the party, but I didn't, want to sleep at the party. So one of his friends offered to let me crash at his house, and I was sleeping on the 3rd floor. And I was like, oh, hey, bro, do you have the Wi-Fi password? Assuming that he might know it off the top of his head. And the guy's like, it's down on the bottom floor. Let me go grab it. And he walked down 3 flights of stairs to go get it. I have never forgiven myself, and that was over a decade ago. So basically, those events, you'll remember them, you'll self-reflect, and you can basically think about or thank this specific system of the brain for that. But always remember though, if you cringe at what you did in the past, that means you have grown as a person, so you can let it slide. It is innate in all of us to be cringe from time to time. Anyhow, how specifically these areas come into play is quite clear. As the oscillations continue, areas such as the frontal lobe would be disrupted through the seizure-like activity of the brain taking place, meaning individual thought and choice, as well as free will and emotional control, is completely disrupted. As a result, this person then enters a daydream-like trance due to forced activation of the default mode network. They are stuck in what is fundamentally a massive daydream their brain is designing, while their movement outside their body is completely unknown to them as it's being dictated by something else. Okay, well, that's all well and good, but how then? Well, to explain this, we need to understand what happens during a spike of hyperactivity taking place in the temporal lobe. Interestingly, as this area becomes overwhelmingly active, this actively causes your consciousness to begin fragmenting. Things like internal narrative coherence is lost, funnily enough, and then when these things start to happen, people report actually having deeply religious experiences. I always find it interesting how that happens and is actually a part of our very brain to have these experiences. One must ask themselves then, what sort of reason would this be built in the first place, and how did it help us with survival? Do other animals experience this, or is it just us? And if it is just us who has this, why do we develop it? But that topic is for yourself to discover. I can't choose what you believe, and I would never want to do that anyways. It's all very individualized. Anyhow, along with hyperactivity disrupting the conscious thought to, the frontal lobe essentially taking you out of the game, but also having the DMN active, this is going to make you see things completely differently. And it's clear that aggression is likely stemming from hyperactivity in the amygdala, which is very close to the temporal lobe, which is known to increase aggression. What it really looks like to me is that the you is stuck inside of a prison, but you don't know what you are looking at are just actually walls around you. Your body is still functional and still possesses all of its faculties that can be used, but you have essentially become a shell with your consciousness kind of behind a wall of synchronized firing neurons so that you can no longer control your body. In an effort to prevent you from breaking free of this arrangement, as the brain may adapt, areas like the hippocampus and DMN are allowed to continue operating so that you don't even realize that you aren't there anymore. You think that you're just reacting to your world and doing things, but it is all made up in your head in one giant hallucination. And this would create the perfect drone scenario, as you would never have to worry about someone breaking free. Like, what's the best cage for something? It's for it to not realize it's even in a cage to begin with. However, it is also possible that there is more to it than just, it's all in your head, bro, now pass me the blood. The portion just talked about is how the brain's natural control over itself may have been prevented or outright stomped out. It's clear, though, external stimuli is also being input to cause the person to, in turn, begin to kind of adopt new directives, I guess you could call them, that would in turn cause them to basically be wildly changed. So now it's time to talk about that, because obviously that is fairly important. And for this, we need to discuss the music emanating from their throats. As the signal entered the brain, it appears to have done more than just synchronized up the neurons and disrupt the functioning of other areas. It also appears to me areas such as the Broca's areas and Wernicke's areas may be altered to a degree in order to make this work. But for this to work, the brain would have to be a receiver of sorts. But then how is that possible? Well, it's all dependent upon the temporal lobe actually synchronizing its firing. If you take a small sliver, right, of just one neuron thick of the temporal lobe that is constantly firing, what you're actually creating is essentially an electrical mesh of sorts. You can kind of think of it like a Faraday cage, right? A Faraday cage being a cage around someone or something that actually blocks out radio signals. And I think the most famous one is Tesla creating one where the electricity was, it didn't shock him, it was just sent around the cage rather than, to himself. But those signals running into a Faraday cage, if strong enough and if you wanted to hear it, could in turn actually be heard if you were to amplify it to create sound. So the temporal lobe is likely behaving in a similar manner to the firing, which then negates the need to actually have this as like, oh, it's just electromagnetism, guys, don't look any deeper into it, like that type of issue. So, pretty cool. Basically, with the temporal lobe firing in a repeating, predictable pattern to disrupt thought, incoming radio signals directed to the human mind are crashing into this mesh as information is encoded into it. This in turn imparts the will that is now missing from those who have changed. These signals appear to be put out by the towers that are located all over our society, which means everyone who was freaking out about 5G, they turned out to be right. Of course, in real life, if you're freaking out about that, it's very unlikely that you're watching this channel in the first place, because you would probably look at me as like a shill for 5G corporations or something. Anyways, you have way more radiation that gets blasted into your body every time you just walk out into the sun, way more than anything 5G is doing. Or hell, if you go to the mountains and you like living in the mountains and you're inhaling radon gas, you're getting a ton of radiation that way too. So this signal being sent out also appears just as sounds as well. As the auditory cortex is the part of the brain that interprets sound, the pulse would continue and then is combined with the radio signals being broadcasted. This in turn would alter the behavior of the cortex to decode the signal, and then after it does that, it is broadcasted. But how is it broadcasted? Well, utilizing the Broca's area of the brain, which is the speech production center, this would in turn, and I need to stop saying in turn, it just uses electrical signals to create sound, right? That's what I'm doing right now. But much like how it already is doing that right now, it could just be playing music using your larynx. It's sort of alarming how all of this syncs up in a way that if everything happened just so, it appears as though it could happen. So as the vocal cords oscillate, don't get me wrong, it would be quite complex and a very difficult feat to pull off, but given that the music is distorted somewhat, the reality is the biological medium being used does have an impact on distorting it to a degree. And this is not only creepy, but it actually is physically strengthening these pathways in the brain, because remember, for your brain to operate as well as it does, there are just patterns that are working within it. Now, the original ones are disrupted at first, but as the brain operates in this way for a prolonged period, those would become stronger. So the longer that you are under control of the actual signal, that becomes the new norm. Every night as the infected lay down, new firing patterns are established as the stronger pathway comparatively to their original functioning is altered. So as this happens, they get further and further away from their own free will, because those used to be the firing patterns. So because of the lack of consciousness affecting the rest of the brain, this creates a perfect storm for the brain to physically change towards utilizing this signal in order to move, think, eat, breathe, and in general just survive. So as the days slip by, it would entrench itself until finally it would be considered equally odd for consciousness to even return, as it was equally odd that it was even lost in the first place. So the music from the throat is an active software update, because by it emitting in the first place, it clearly shows the brain structure is being actively altered. This can do things to other areas of the brain as well, and given it's a radio signal, this mesh, while not massively powerful, may have like a small range of effect, allowing for signals to be sent out locally, meaning that those nearby can react to what others are seeing as their brains produce this signal that is now primed to receive the signal as well. So this is how the hive mind behavior is able to function, given it's been a few days of time that they even run across this. This has caused them to be able to read each other's minds in the immediate areas of others as well. Now, given enough of them may be able to produce enough of the signal, this may also, like if you took like 100 of them and put them together, the signal is now strong enough that they're broadcasting that can communicate with towers nearby, where it is amplified and then sent out to others, which are other biological broadcasters. Like this is known, the dude in the red jacket, while we don't know who he is, he appears to really just be the avatar given to the enemy from Cage's books. But clearly someone had to build this thing. Was it a human, an alien, my editor Greg? Who's to say? But it's interesting that even though Cage appears to already have been subdued in the first place, his brain is aware that something is wrong. It just doesn't know what is wrong because it cannot communicate with itself. So, in the absence of evidence, it applies what it knows to the problem, which is the problem from his book. Now, what would happen if you turn the signal off? I think people would just go into a coma for a while. While conscious thought may return, everyone's brain has been altered to the point that structurally, many things they would have known from their previous life are now lost. It's very likely most of society would go back to caveman level of tech, because who would know how anything worked? Everybody would just have amnesia. And it's not even like, that's not even really the main issue, to be honest with you. With everyone in a coma momentarily until their brain regains its functioning, it's more likely many of them would never even wake up in the first place due to just the sheer exposure from the elements. So depending on how many people were affected by this, uncontacted tribes would probably fare the best, and possibly just underneath them would be me in my parking garage in my apartment, because I get zero signal in there. But apart from those two options, everyone else is screwed. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. I do hope that you enjoy these older styles of video, and actually, you know what? I'm not gonna lie to you. I enjoy them better as well, because it makes writing a little bit more enjoyable, because I'm kind of like a one-track mind when I start writing, and it was really hard to switch patterns. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales, and Roanoke Games link in the description. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the astronaut tier, we have Bananas Are Epic. Thank you, my man. At the astrophysicist tier, we have Death's Dancer. Thank you as well, bro. And at the scientist tier, we have Dakota23, Frank Shaftcrank. I actually love electric cars and the anglerfish, which is a big lie. Invictus Echo, Metric System, Official Texan, and Stutz. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support. It goes a long way towards helping out, and you guys are absolute ballers. But all right, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll see y'all in the next one. Shout out to War Thunder again for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to check out War Thunder now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or on mobile, and use my links in the pinned comment and video description to register. Those of you who are new or haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across PC and console, including multiple premium vehicles and in-game currency.